Why Ibrahim Traoré's rise terrifies Africa's old political culture. Hello everyone, and welcome back. What if Africa's biggest political crisis isn't foreign pressure, but the way power is treated at home? What if the problem isn't a lack of elections, but a culture that turns leaders into untouchable figures and politics into a marketplace? In a speech that is already stirring discomfort across the continent, Professor PLO Lumumba said the quiet part out loud. He challenged the worship of authority, exposed the business model behind elections, and questioned a version of democracy that Africa was taught to accept without redesigning for itself. This message lands at a time when leaders like Ibrahim Traoré of Burkina Faso are openly questioning old political arrangements, and when young Africans are beginning to ask harder questions of their own systems. Tonight, we're going to unpack why this speech matters, what it reveals about African politics, and why ideas, not personalities, may finally be returning to the center of the conversation. Stay with me. Dear friends, PLO Lumumba's speech did not begin with policy proposals or technical reforms. It began with culture, with the way power is perceived, performed, and protected in many African societies. His first target was not foreign influence. It was the mystification of leadership. He described a familiar scene. Officials treated as if they exist above ordinary life, welcomed everywhere, deferred to automatically, invited to speak even when they have nothing meaningful to say. This culture, he argued, turns public office into something sacred rather than accountable. And once leadership becomes sacred, criticism becomes taboo. That is where governance begins to fail. Lumumba's argument is that Africa's political crisis is not only about bad leaders, it is about a system that encourages bad leadership by rewarding loyalty over ideas and reverence over results. When leaders are treated as demigods, institutions weaken, rules bend, and responsibility dissolves. From there, he moved to something even more uncomfortable, the commercialization of politics. In many countries, elections are no longer contests of ideas. They are financial operations. Candidates spend enormous sums to gain office, far more than they could ever earn legally through salaries. Lumumba posed a simple question. If the math does not add up, where is the incentive? The answer, he suggested, is that office is treated as an investment, a gateway to contracts, influence, and informal control over resources. Politics becomes a business model. And once that happens, corruption is no longer a deviation. It is the logic of the system. But Lumumba did not place the blame solely on politicians. He turned the mirror toward the electorate. When voters accept short-term benefits in exchange for long-term silence, democracy becomes transactional. Ideas lose value. Accountability weakens. Citizens are trained to listen not for solutions, but for handouts. Hunger, uncertainty, and survival pressures make it easy for politics to be reduced to the immediate moment. This is not a moral judgment. It is a structural diagnosis. Lumumba argued that in such a system, even well-articulated ideas struggle to survive. Candidates who speak about healthcare, education, innovation, or infrastructure are often ignored unless they also bring immediate material incentives. Over time, politics stops being about vision and becomes about distribution. And that, he warned, is a threat to democracy itself. The speech then addressed a deeper contradiction. The political model Africa was encouraged to adopt, multi-party democracy, as practiced today, was not designed within African historical or social contexts. It was imported, presented as the only legitimate option, and accepted without sufficient adaptation. This does not mean pluralism is wrong. Lumumba's point was more subtle. Systems must be designed to fit realities. Africa was told what democracy should look like, but not invited to redesign it to suit its own conditions. Ironically, Africa is often portrayed as uniquely incapable of managing diversity. Lumumba rejected this outright. He pointed to Europe's own history, states with far fewer ethnic groups that still experience devastating internal conflicts. He noted that many European countries remain largely homogeneous, while African states, created within artificial boundaries, have managed to remain intact despite immense challenges. In this sense, Africa's resilience is underestimated. The problem, Lumumba argued, is not diversity. It is leadership without accountability and systems without integrity. This is where the speech connects to the present moment. Across parts of the continent, A new generation is emerging, less patient with excuses, more skeptical of authority, and increasingly aware that corruption is not inevitable. Young Africans are beginning to ask why there is enough money for convoys and ceremonies, but not enough for schools, clinics, or jobs. They are beginning to question why votes are bought instead of earned, and why loyalty is rewarded more than competence. This awakening matters because it shifts politics from personality to ideas. And that shift helps explain why leaders like Ibrahim Traoré in Burkina Faso resonate with so many young people. Not because they are perfect, but because they openly challenge the culture of untouchable leadership. They speak in a language of responsibility rather than entitlement. They frame authority as temporary and conditional, not divine. Lumumba's speech reinforces that direction. It insists that Africa's future does not belong to thieves, foreign interests, or recycled elites. It belongs to citizens who think critically, demand accountability, and refuse to worship power. But the speech also carried a warning. Romantic rebellion without institutional reform leads nowhere. Replacing one group of leaders with another changes little if the system itself remains transactional. Ending corruption requires more than speeches. It requires rules that apply to everyone, institutions that outlast personalities, and citizens willing to defend ideas even when it costs them in the short term. This is why Lumumba emphasized demystification. When leaders are treated as ordinary public servants, they can be questioned. When office is stripped of sacred status, performance becomes measurable. And when politics returns to the realm of ideas, elections regain meaning. For American audiences watching this unfold, the lesson is not abstract. It speaks to a universal tension between symbolism and substance, between democracy as ritual and democracy as accountability. Africa's struggle in this sense mirrors debates happening far beyond the continent. The difference is that Africa's margin for error is smaller. Every failure carries generational consequences. Every stolen opportunity compounds existing pressures. That is why Lumumba's speech feels urgent. It is not an attack on democracy. It is a demand that democracy finally work. And it is a reminder that no foreign system, no borrowed model, and no charismatic figure can substitute for disciplined institutions and an informed electorate. Ideas must matter again. So this speech was not meant to flatter. It was meant to confront. P.L. Lumumba challenged Africans to stop worshiping leaders and start demanding ideas, integrity, and accountability. He reminded us that corruption survives not only because of bad politicians, but because of systems that reward silence and short-term thinking. At a time when figures like Ibrahim Traoré in Burkina Faso are questioning old political habits, this message feels especially relevant. It suggests that Africa's renewal will not come from replacing one hero with another, but from building cultures and institutions where no leader is above scrutiny. The future belongs to citizens who question, think, and act, because when ideas replace worship, power finally becomes accountable, and history begins to move. Thank you for watching.